Geordie LaForge is attending an artificial intelligence seminar. One of the Creosian colonies is fighting for independence, and Counselor Troy doesn't believe Geordie's story about meeting a lady on Risa. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 4, Episode 24, already, The Mind's Eye, story by Ken Schaefer and Renee Echevarria, teleplay by Renee Echevarria. This is directed by David Livingston. What a big surprise. What luck. Special guest today, Mr. David Livingston, is here with us. How are you today, David?
Yes.
I'm terrific. Thank you for the invite, guys.
So excited to have you.
It's a pleasure to have you. Absolutely.
So let's get this started. This is such an important episode to have you, and such a great episode because, true or false, this is your directorial debut.
True.
And how did it come about?
I don't know if you guys have talked about it in the past, but Rick Berman created the DIT School, which was director in training for actors and behind the scenes people who aspired to be directors that worked on the show. And the first graduate of the DIT School was Jonathan Frakes. And he proved the worthwhileness of having such such a school or training period, because he certainly delivered, and his subsequent career has proved it was a major success and a great call by Rick Berman. So we got into the fifth season, and I think it was fourth or fifth season, Ryan, which...
Fourth season. This is the end of the fourth. Yeah. Yep.
Fourth season. At the beginning of the fourth season, Rick mentioned to me if I wanted to go to the DIT School as well. He liked the way that I responded to dailies and would talk to him about stuff, and saw that I had a passion for the work. And he said, if you want to go to DIT School, do that, and then I'll decide whether I want to give you a shot. So I had a lot of emotional reservations about doing it. So I went back into therapy for 9 months to get over my fear of directing. And also I went to the DIT School, where I watched other directors working on the set. I went to editorial, post-production, did a deep dive into the scripts, and thought about what I would do if I was given the opportunity to direct. And then after my therapy was over, and after I had felt I had gone, I did a lot of scene study where I'd bring in, where I'd get actors to work on scenes with me and figure out what the through line was and the premise and all that kind of stuff, all that directing kind of stuff. Read a lot of books. And after that 9 months, I went to Rick and said, I'm ready if you want to give me a shot. And he did. And I got The Mind's Eye. So that's a capsulized version of my journey to directing.
Wow.
I also always wanted to be a director. I went to USC Film School, and my career path was always in production, not on the creative side. So it was a great gift to be able to transfer over and into the creative side when Rick offered me the directing job.
Wow, that is a great story. I didn't realize about Rick and this DIT School. I've obviously seen a lot of the actors direct throughout the course of this show. I've worked with LeVar Burton myself, and obviously, Renee and Avery and a lot of directors, and Jonathan Frakes, who's, essentially now become the all-time leading scorer in directing when it comes to Star Trek. But David, I want to give you super compliments on this episode, and the choices that you made I thought were excellent. There were aspects of the ship that I felt like I hadn't seen before that you captured in your shots, particularly some of the lighting panels on the higher part of the ceiling area. I got to see a lot of those lighting panels, which sometimes get cropped a lot. It gives me more depth of the ship and how ceilings are kind of laid out. Um, Loved a lot of the choices you made as far as the overhead pan shot that you went into in the turbo lift, which went into a close up of Geordi. Another way of just seeing the turbo lift in a different way. For me, what I look for when I'm watching is does the director make me feel like I'm seeing the ship in new ways and feeling a different experience? That I feel like you accomplished with Flying Colors, and a lot of the camera movements as well, like the pans, the overhead sweeps coming down, even the big cargo bay. It felt like I had seen it in a different way in this particular episode. The cargo bay itself, the ladder going up, the bigness of it, just felt the different. Just captured a lot of the ship, and so I want to commend you for the attention to detail that you put into these episodes. It really resonated with me.
That is so gracious of you. Thank you. It surprised me when I went back and looked at the episode. I watched it yesterday, and it clearly reflected how I saw things. And I didn't realize it until I did the episode, how I saw things. And it is reflective of everything else I did after that on all the other episodes I did on Star Trek. And that is, I like to see a lot of information, and I love wide angles. And what you're talking about, seeing the ceiling panel, I like to shoot low and I like to shoot wide. So the panel stuff you were talking about and the ceiling and stuff, I just put the camera low and shot with a very wide angle lens. Same thing with the cargo bay. It's a fascinating set, and I wanted to show how large it was and you do that by making the people seem small. And the ladder was a great piece. I'm sure Herman gave me that, but I needed to incorporate it and show the difference. And you brought up the turbo lift shot. I didn't do this in my subsequent directing, but I shot that scene with two different lenses, where the camera starts high and then comes down into a close up of LeVar. I shot it with a wide lens, which is the one that's in the picture, and a very, very, very wide lens, hoping that Rick might pick the very, very, very wide lens, and he didn't, because it was very, very, very wide. And my thing was, if I had only shot it with the very, very, very wide lens, he might have been inclined, not necessarily forced, but inclined to pick it. But because I gave him the choice, he picked the less radical one. So I learned a big lesson. If you want to make your point, make your point. If they don't like it, they can tell you to reshoot it. So it was a bit of a lesson learned for me to not give the producers a choice. But it was
that's
it
funny
was very,
because
very, very wide. Yeah.
That's funny because when I think back on the times that we worked together, I kind of remember distinctly moments where you would say as a director, "Cut, print, let's do it again." And I would say, "I thought we're printing that," and that was, I guess, because you wanted these other variations of what you wanted.
That was not I shouldn't have done that. And you are not the first actor to have pointed that out to me. In fact, you're probably the 50th actor. But I have no justification for it other than I loved seeing things happen. And sometimes there was a minor thing with the camera that I felt we could get better. But sometimes I wanted to see what you guys did. And maybe there was something else, something magic might happen. And that was selfish on my part. And I took a lot of static for it. And I regret the way that I did it. I shouldn't have said, cut, print, one more. I should have said, cut, one more, and not print, but I would get in the editing room, and I got to tell you, I looked at everything, and I even went back and printed a lot of stuff that I didn't print originally, just making sure that I didn't miss one little beat that might have been magic that I hadn't seen before. If I was obsessive compulsive on the stage, I was even more so in the editing room. A lot of directors would go in and cut their episode and be done before the allowance of days that they were given by the Directors Guild contract. I would take mine to the last second, where Peter Lauritsen, who was the head of post-production, would have to haul me out of the editing room, because I didn't want to. First of all, I didn't want to let go. I love the process, and I would come home at night. And in the early days of the editing, before we got into full digital editing, I had cassettes that I would bring home, and on my little TV set, I'd be putting in and out of cassettes, writing down time code numbers and stuff. OCD to the max, but I loved the process, and I loved finding little things and satisfying myself. I wasn't out to satisfy Rick Berman, the other producers, the writers, the audience. I had to satisfy myself, and if I didn't satisfy myself, then I felt I was letting the process down. So kudos to me. I'm not trying to brag about it. I'm simply saying I had so much invested and felt such a responsibility that I had to give my best at every moment.
Well, David, I'll brag on your behalf real quick, because there are a lot of things I noticed. A couple things I wanted to say. Beyond just wide shots, you seem to really love layers and depth. And you had such a great use of foreground and background. And like, first of all, just the shot with Geordi listening to the music and the Romulan warbird appearing in the background, right? Then also, like you mentioned, the cargo bay, right, with the shuttlecraft there. And we're seeing things. There are people in the foreground, there's background, there's up here, there's 3 stories. There's so much going on, almost like a Rubik's Cube. Also,
texture.
and in engineering, same thing. That shot in engineering, I was like, this is the craziest shot I've ever seen. We're like looking down, we're looking down at one level, we're standing on another level, there's somebody else down on another level. There was so much going on in this, on top of the fact that this seemed like it was actually a pretty difficult episode to direct on its own, and yet you took that challenge and still leveled it up 2 or 3 notches. And my question to you is, David, they clearly threw you into the deep end on your directorial debut. They didn't just give you Counselor Troy has a love interest, to kind of get your feet wet and kind of get used to it. When you read the script, did you think, oh boy, there's a lot going on in this. This is a doozy. Or did you think, or were you excited, like, oh, here we go, I'm going to show what I can do?
The latter. I mean, come on. One of my favorite movies is John Frankenheimer's version of The Manchurian Candidate. And when I read the script, it was The Manchurian Candidate. And I died and went to heaven. I even did a homage shot to The Manchurian Candidate when Geordi shoots O'Brien. It's almost exactly the same kind of shot that Frankenheimer did in The Manchurian Candidate, and it was my homage, because that's what we were doing. We were doing The Manchurian Candidate, and I always loved the episodes where our characters were outside of their normal characters, where they were not themselves. And also to get into people's minds. I love doing mind melds and crazy stuff like that. And to have LeVar possessed and tortured and brainwashed, what could be more fun for a director? And when I look back on the episode, I said, yeah, it was my first effort, and I learned a lot. And I hopefully progressed as my directing career continued. And I would have done a lot more today than I would then, but I am satisfied with what I did do, because I didn't walk away from that premise of being brainwashed and trying to get the audience to feel that they were in some way experiencing the same thing that Geordi was experiencing. So thank you. I had nothing but fun. I thought I had to overcome my fear to direct, but my first day on the set, I was the kid in the candy store, and I didn't want to go home. I could have slept on the stage for the 7 days.
One of the things that resonate when I watch this episode, David, is the understanding that you have of the characters. I felt like each character was well incorporated into the script, and gave great performances that was accurate to their characters. So that's a testament to both your directing skills and also Rene Echevarria for the way he wrote this episode. It felt like the voice of each character. But I wanted to ask you, because this is when I felt like you were in the editing room. I said, he had to have been in the editing room. Obviously, you mentioned that. But the moment when I felt like he was definitely there leaving this kind of impact was at the end of the episode. Sometimes we see Star Trek make a comical turn at the very end of an episode. And so you'll be digesting this very serious, complex matter, or solving this problem, or using your critical thought. And then at the end, it's like, like a Leave It to Beaver type moment, and they go into this comical one-liner. What I felt on this episode was the tone was a lot different for a closeout episode, which I loved, because it ended with the Troy, which you chose to put her on more of a black backdrop, which allowed her to really pop on screen for me, that there wasn't anything behind her. But it was a very emotional and compassionate sit down between Troy, who's doing her actual counseling skills, which we get to see in full effect, work her way with Geordi and trying to exercise his memory and getting it back. But you end on this very lovely musical soft note with the slow pan of the ship. It felt very healing for me. It felt like a good note to end on, more of like an optimism for things will get okay and we'll get back to normal. But I wanted to talk just a little bit about the musical cues for that ending, the kind of slow rollout. Was that something that you were really, trying to emphasize at the end?
First of all, in the beginning was the word. This was all in the script. And Rene was a wonderful writer. I don't know if you remember Sirach, but he did the rewrite on The Visitor and brought in a lot of the emotional content and context of that script. And these were Rene's words. And in terms of the actors, I got out of the way. I very rarely directed the actors. I didn't have to direct LeVar and Marina. They knew their stuff. All I had to do was put the camera in the place that I thought it should be to capture what they were doing as actors. That was my job. And then I got out of the way. And what they both did in that scene was fantastic. I didn't have to direct it. They knew the actors. First of all, they had the words, and they knew their given circumstances. They had gone through an arc where she made fun of him going to Rise and all this stuff. And it was set up to go to this incredibly fraught moment for him to realize that this was going to be with him forever. And I love the episodes that affected characters to that point. The problem with Star Trek in general was you didn't feel that continued, and it didn't seem to have affected their characters as the series went on, because you can't keep revisiting that. But that moment where LeVar is thinking about everything that went on is so moving. And to me, it's the best moment. The last shot and the last bit of the pushing is the most powerful part of the episode because of everything that's led up to it, and how LeVar, without his eyes, I mean, he had the most beautiful eyes, but he does it without us. He's got that crazy visor thing on, which he couldn't wait to get rid of, but he sells it. the eyes are the soul of the actor to the soul, and he didn't have that. He had to do it with his voice, his emotion, and everything. And it's the proof is in the pudding. So again, I put the camera there and let them do their job. So I'll take credit for any part of it you want to give me, but and the music, episodic directors do not get to participate in the scoring. They don't get to be there for the scoring session to be able to say to the composer, "I want something like this at the end." It just doesn't happen. So I can't take any credit for any of the music either in terms of the direction of it.
But it was so complimentary.
But that's the life of the episodic director. We had very little control over the creative part of the show after we finished shooting, and that's a reality. Excuse me.
And also, you mentioned Manchurian Candidate, and I wanted to ask: is that the reason why you chose some of those angles to emphasize the eerie, the because it felt like, there's certain moments when you're watching horror or some kinds of suspense films where the action is emphasized by camera angles, and it felt that way as well in this moment. For example, when Jordy's walking down the hallway.
That was I knew you were going to bring that one up. That's the best moment right there. It's beautiful.
Right.
Beautiful lens.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful lens. And the ship is captivating. Like, again, I get to see the ship in the hallway. Felt very long. You made the ship feel big. Like, you made it feel like this was a big place. And so, but specifically that camera angle where you're walking with Jordy, he's kind of walking towards the camera and you guys are all pulling back. And I felt like, I was like, oh, that's one of those suspense movies, horror type of shots. And I don't know if it was intended to be that way, but I got that feeling, and I thought it was excellent. Like I said, I got to see parts of the ship where I felt I didn't see this before. Where this is great. It's big.
I agree with you 100%. I love the wide angle, and I agree with your summation of the effect of the shot. I stole from wherever I could steal from. Rob Bowman, who was one of the early directors on The Next Generation, he would do stuff like that as well. So I'm with you. And in Manchurian Candidate, Frankenheimer shot a lot of stuff in depth, where you'd have something in focus in the foreground and in the background. So again, you synthesize all this stuff, and then you don't try to copy, but you try to incorporate it into how you see things. So it's not a direct steal, but it's my interpretation of that process. The other shot is the push in to LeVar when he's being tortured. I looked at the script, and it doesn't say that he screams in the script, and I don't remember how that came about, but the impact of that shot doesn't happen unless he's screaming at the end. Otherwise, it's just pushing in. So again, maybe it was serendipity or whatever, but shots are important. The director's job is to use the camera as a character. It's the director's character. You have a character, Chirac, right? And my character as a director is the camera. And to me, it's my most important character, because I am interpreting the story, and I'm telling the audience where to pay attention. And with the camera, I'm trying to affect them emotionally. What's your job as an actor? To affect the audience emotionally. If you're not doing that as a director, why are you doing the job? You're just shooting shots to shoot shots. But every shot first should advance the plot, advance the story, advance the through line, advance the premise, but also to keep the audience emotionally invested. Right?
Yeah, and let me give you one more kudos again for the way that you did that. The shot with Ambassador Kell while he's eating this octopus or whatever it was, and then in comes Geordi again, this foreground, background. and the way he kind of talks to him without really directly looking at him. I mean, it was beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you. No coverage of. We don't cut into LeVar.
No cut.
That would have spoiled it, because the power is with this guy he's just eating his dinner, and it's all rote.
Doesn't even look at him.
And he knows who it is. He knows who it is.
Doesn't even, no, he says, Dorothy, Jordy, do this. Dorothy's my wife. Some of that's in the script, obviously, but I love that moment. By the way, Lawrence Dobson, who plays that guy,
killed it.
He and I had a great time because he directed TOS.
Oh,
he directed?
Yes. Lawrence Dobson was a well-known episodic director in the 60s, as well as an actor. He's in one of my favorite movies, North by Northwest. He's one of the actors in it. And I had such a great time talking to him and getting guidance from him. I pumped him for as much stuff as I could get. Because as a director, he was a treasure to me as a director. And he was great in the part. Fabulous. But
wow, he directed the second episode that ever aired of Star Trek, Charlie X. Wow, that's amazing.
There you go. Isn't that wild?
It's
a small community.
It's like full circle there. So, David, we only have you for another minute or two here, but it's really cool that you went back and you watched the episode again, whatever it is, 33 years later. Can you give us we've gotten a sense of it, but can you walk us through the feeling you get when you watch the episode, your directorial debut, again, 33 years later? Are you constantly doing what a lot of us do, which is, I should have done this, or I should have done? Is it a sense of pride? Is it fun? What's the feeling like?
As a first episode, I'm okay with it. I thought the end was poor. I did something at the end where I was pressed for time and I compromised, which when I got home that night, I was devastated and said I would never do that again. And hopefully I never did do that again, where I felt that I let the clock rule my process. But I see in the episode what my approach to directing was and how it influenced everything that came after. So I basically showed the tools that I was going to use as a director going forward. And that was fun for me to see, saying, oh yeah, well, that's where that came from. And I just kept doing the same thing for another 61 episodes. It's all kind of there. Yeah, it could have been a lot better. And there's things I'd want to change, but I didn't. I felt I went through my quote unquote vision and kind of developed it. So in that way, I'm satisfied with the work.
Awesome.
Let me say, I don't think it could have been much better. This is one of my top episodes of all time. I didn't find any flaw in it.
Okay.
As far as this series is concerned, I'm putting this in my top 5 episode off the bat.
Whoa, come on.
Yeah, it's up there with Measure of a Man, Yesterday's Enterprise. To me, it's one of the top 5 I've seen so far up till this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because it had me engaged. It had me engaged, couldn't look away. I love it when the guy who is part of the crime is also part of solving the right. It's like it's a double. It's the Manchurian Candidate. It's so wonderful.
That was a great story.
And having the ambassador in on it, I mean, all of those things was just I couldn't pull away, and I felt every character had a very logical part to play. Data and Riker playing investigation on the E something. The 10 forward shots, seeing the bar, seeing, that whole setup with O'Brien, another great use of the character. Worf's suspicions, Worf used as security, excellent. Dr. Crusher, also her medical moment with him, and just, that compassion there. And obviously Troy, which I also talked about earlier. So you couldn't use a cast better than you did in this episode. everybody had a very integral part to play in the story. And you have guest stars, and you have Romulans, and you have Bird of Praise. I mean, what else do you want? I don't think there's much more than that. I love this episode. It felt like a feature film in an episode, and I want to say you did a fantastic job.
Totally.
Fantastic job.
Rock, if I hadn't needed an agent anymore, you'd be first on the list. So thank you. That's so generous of you, and I get a big kick out of you guys. I do watch your podcasts, and I'm grateful that I love coming back and doing this kind of stuff and revisiting these things and all these great memories and being part of this community, which is so extraordinary. We are all so fortunate to exist in this world, and the proof is in the pudding that this is 35 years later. What other television show, feature films? Yeah, Star Wars. Yeah, that's certainly working. But look at what Star Trek does, and look at all the shows that have keep getting born again. I'm so grateful to be a part of this world.
Mm-hmm. And we're grateful to have you a part of this world for 35 years. My goodness, you've left quite the legacy. What did you say, 61 episodes, something like that? Unbelievable. 62. Plus, as a producer, line producer, supervising producer on so many episodes, so many shows, truly you are one of the heartbeats of Star Trek for the last 35 years. And Mr. David Livingston, we hope to see you again sometime soon. We really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks very much.
You got it.
Now, everybody at home, stick around. Sirach and I are going to throw way more compliments David's way while he's gone. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule.